Kol ha'olam kulo, all of the world, kol ha'olam kulo, in its entirety, gesher tsar me'od, is a very narrow bridge. V'ha'ikar, but the essence, the main thing, v'ha'ikar, lo lefached klal, do not fear at all. Kol ha'olam kulo, gesher tsar me'od, v'ha'ikar, lo lefached klal. These are the words of Rav Nachman of Wroclaw, who lived from 1772 to 1810, Eastern European rabbi, leader of Hasidic Judaism from the town of Wroclaw. These words are the answer. Now, let me tell you what's the question. In this week's Torah portion, beginning of chapter 24, we read, V'Avraham zaken bai biyamin, and Abraham had reached old age. V'Adonai berach et Avraham bakol, and God blessed Abraham bakol. God blessed Abraham with everything. So says the Torah. Except, if one is a careful reader of Torah, actually, in fact, even if one just has cursory knowledge of Torah, a question is asked. What does it mean to say that God blessed Abraham with everything? Let's think about that for a second. Let's think about Abraham's life. We join Abraham's life where he's told that he can't grow up in his father's home, that he can't grow up in the land that he's familiar with, that God has got to take him to a totally different place, to a strange land. Not an easy thing. And in fact, it gets worse because when he gets to that land, that promised land that God said would be his place, he goes there and there's a famine. And he has to leave that land. Doesn't sound so blessed to me. And then he has to not once, but twice go to different parts of the land, different countries. And in those countries, they are so unsafe, his life is so at risk, that he has to hide his identity. He has to lie about the nature of his relationship with Sarah, with his wife, in order just to live. Doesn't sound so blessed to me. And in addition to that, beyond just those dangers, you have him having family strife, starting with his nephew Lot, and Lot's servants and his servants quarrel and are on the verge of fighting with one another until Abraham intercedes. Then you have the strife that exists even closer to home. He has the pain of his wife Sarah, his beloved wife, who is barren. And then in her pain, she reaches out and she gives Hagar, her handmaid, to Abraham. And Hagar, will then give birth. So now he has to deal with the fact that Sarah is barren. And now there's animosity between Sarah and Hagar to such an extent that the child ultimately who gets born, Ishmael, will have to be banished. Doesn't sound like a blessed life to me. And then on top of that, he's ordered to kill his son. Okay, well that one might be a bit different. But okay, depending on how you're feeling about your children at any given moment. But it doesn't sound like a particularly blessed life to have God come along and say you have to offer up your son and kill him. And not only that, but to just rub it in even more. Chapter 24 begins with Abraham having had to bury Sarah, his wife. Where's the blessing? How is it that at this point in time in the Torah, it has the ability to say to us, and God berach et Avraham b'kol, and God blessed Abraham with everything. The rabbis of our tradition were also careful readers of the text, and this question jumped to their minds right away as well. And they offer numerous answers. One that's offered by one of the more famous medieval commentators known as Ibn Ezra is that Abraham was blessed in everything. What does it mean? It means he had riches, he had possessions, he had honor, he had longevity, he had children. I suppose that is exactly what we might have considered a blessed life to be. But the rabbis weren't satisfied with that. And they noted that while Abraham had a son, he did lack a daughter. And so they cleverly interpret that when it says, and God blessed Abraham bakol, what that means is that he gave birth to a daughter. And what was the daughter's name? Bakol. And in this way he was blessed because they understood that while having a son was a great blessing, to have a daughter enabled him to complete the mitzvah of pru or vu, of being fruitful and multiplying and having one child of each sex. And others come forward and they say, no. His blessing wasn't with his children, or the children we imagine he may have had, and his blessing wasn't with his possessions and his riches and his property. His richness or his blessing came in this way, that he was content with what he had. And that even though he was wealthy, if he had had nothing, he would have fulfilled what the rabbis say in Pirkei Avot, in the ethics of our ancestors, when it says, Ezehu Sameach, who is happy? Ezehu Ashir, who is rich? Hasameach Behelko, the one who is happy with what he has. So here are but three of many different answers to the question, in what way was Abraham blessed? But I believe that the Torah itself offers the answer. That the Torah itself offers the answer 9 chapters before. Beginning of chapter 15, verse 1, it says, sometime later, the word of the Lord came to Avram in a vision and said, Al tira Avram, do not fear Avram, Anachi magen lach, I will be a shield for you. I will be a shield for you. You do not have to fear. And I believe in that verse we see why Abraham was blessed. Because what God gave Abraham was a sense of security, the reassurance that it would be all right. Abraham was blessed because he could approach his life and he did not have any fear. It's just like Rav Nachman says, Kol ha'olam kulo gesher tsar me'od, v'ha'ikar lo lefached klal. All of the world is a very narrow bridge, but the most important thing is to not be afraid. My friends, we are surrounded by uncertainty, always, everywhere, at each moment of our lives. We're surrounded by uncertainty just through the existence of these frail human bodies that we possess, as wondrous as they are. We're surrounded by uncertainties in Mother Nature and in the power that she can bring and the destruction that can flow from her. And we are surrounded by the uncertainty of just flawed human nature. These three things, our bodies, the natural world around us, and even our own nature, constitute a sea of uncertainty that swirls about us always. One day I am fine, and the next I can be diagnosed. One day I can have a home, and as we've seen in pictures of the past week, next I can be standing near a pile of rubble. One day I can be sharing my life with someone I love, and the next day I can be single and divorced. We walk in a life that is a very narrow bridge, surrounded around us on all sides by the uncertainty of that life. And in the face of so much uncertainty, it is easy to be afraid. It is understandable to be afraid. It is even reasonable to be afraid. But such fear kills us. Such fear kills us because it can immobilize us. It narrows our vision of the world and the possibilities that life has. It shuts us off as it shuts us down. And it stops us from actually living. So how do we deal with this fear? How do we deal with the world around us? The answer, again, is in what Rav Nachman says. We have to understand that our lives are like crossing a narrow bridge. And it's learning how to cross the bridge that we are able to overcome our fear. We understand this as Americans. Franklin Delano Roosevelt said it perfectly. There is only one thing to fear, and that is fear itself. Our challenge in being able to live our lives is to overcome the fear that afflicts us. And how do we do so? The same way we cross a narrow bridge. It's two parts. First, you take a breath. You take a breath both literally and figuratively. In order to overcome the fear and panic, the anxiety that sometimes washes over us like a wave, we have to stop and breathe, literally. But also we can do it figuratively. We can do it figuratively by developing within ourselves a profound appreciation for the current blessings of our life. And in such a way, we center and ground ourselves. And that's the first part of crossing that narrow bridge. And the second part is simply this. You only focus on the next step. One step at a time. When we are physically overcome by pain, by fear, by the anxiety that surrounds us, when we think, how am I going to be able to get up and face the day? We breathe, and then we don't think about the multitudes of the things that we will encounter in that day, because that will overwhelm us. What we need to do is just put one foot down first as we get out of bed. And then another. And then another. We do it literally in those moments when we are overwhelmed. But we do it figuratively as well when we consider a day in which there's so much that we have to cover, so many painful issues we may be facing, so many struggles, so many people, so many demands, so much going on. How do we deal with it? Do we face the fullness of it? Once again, that leaves us fearful and unable to move. On the contrary, one task at a time, one thing, and then the next, and then the next. This is the two-part process that enables us to find the courage within us to overcome what we fear, so that we too may walk that narrow bridge of life that surrounds us, and so that we too, like Abraham, will be blessed in all. Kol halam kulo geshet tzar meod, geshet tzar meod, geshet tzar meod. Kol halam kulo geshet tzar meod, geshet tzar meod. Ve'harikar, ve'harikar, lo lefached klar. Ve'harikar, ve'harikar, lo lefached klar. Shabbat shalom, everyone.